So, of course, a central flashpoint in the big, beautiful bill has been the impact on Medicaid, as Americans have voiced their concerns about the bill in town halls across the country. Remember, senators are back home for the Memorial Day recess. Republican Senator Joni Ernst of Iowa at one point responded this way to a constituent. Take a look.
People are not, well, we all are going to die.
Well, fact check true. We are all going to die. But of course, she got some blowback for having that be her response to a constituent. We're just going to show you what her apology looked like. It's worth noting, you can probably see it if you look carefully in the background. She is taping this from a cemetery.
I made an incorrect assumption that everyone in the auditorium understood that, yes, we are all going to perish from this earth. So I apologize. And I'm really, really glad that I did not have to bring up the subject of the tooth fairy as well.
Okay, our panel is back. Marc Short, I have to say, I can do sarcasm along with the best of them, but like, yeesh.
Look, Joni's a great senator. She's going to be fine politically. But I think Republican in the messaging here, we have to talk about the fact that 10 years ago, there were 50 million people on Medicaid. Today, we're at 78, 79 million people. It is unsustainable. And people on Medicaid are not getting the best health. What the Republican plan does is simply to say that those who are able-bodied should be working. That is something that a vast majority of Americans agree with. If you say, do you support Medicaid cuts? The vast majority disagree with that. If you say simply, should people who are able and physically able to work be required to work or at least seeking a job, the vast majority of people agree with that. And that's what Republicans should be talking about.
I mean, one of the problems here, though, is that you have members like Josh Hawley, hardly known as a liberal or a moderate, saying that actually this bill is deeply problematic because of what it does to Medicaid.
Sure. But Josh Hawley's changed a lot. He's become a very big government Republican these days who supported vast new regulations and vast new government programs.
Marc, I mean, I appreciate this because, you know, obviously you're our card-carrying member Republican on the panel. But this did not used to be an issue where if you said the Republican plan is this and it's to cut, yes, you would be speaking for everybody, but like you're not in the Republican Party, right? Like that's what this fight is about. There are many Republicans who think that the Medicaid cuts go too deep.
Absolutely. I think that's true. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking there was 53 senators when we passed this bill in 2017. We really had 51 because John McCain was ill. We would have loved to have had the sort of the flexibility of 53, but there are more divisions in our party now,
and the
which makes it harder.
Can't be Joni Ernst's message, which is like, hey, you're going to die anyway.
No, agreed.
Why not sooner rather than later? That's not a winning message.
But we should be talking about able-bodied people being allowed to work. That should be the messaging for the Republicans, as opposed to falling into Democrat talking points about cuts.
I mean, so Mawalitha, you've been a political consultant. Would you have advised Joni Ernst to do that?
Nope. But I'd say, like, it does tell us a lot about the times, right? It does tell us that in today's political world and today's media environment, the driving ideology for a lot of folks is simply troll, right? Like that becomes the ideology. It's to own the libs. It's to mock your opponents. It's to mock your constituents.
Fairly, Democrats are doing this too. This isn't just something on the right. This is something on the left too.
And like I said, a sign of the times. We are in an era now where because of the clicks, because of the media attention, trolling your constituents. When you and I were coming up in the business, they were the last people you would mock, or your constituents. Here's where we are now.
Yeah, so I think another thing that's changed is that it used to be that if you were in favor of more generous entitlements, generous Medicaid benefits, whatever, and a Republican, it meant you were Susan Collins, a squishy, moderate kind of person. But because of the changing nature of the demographics of the Trump coalition, you now get hardcore cultural right-wingers who have the politics of squishy rhino Republicans and Democrats. So Josh Hawley is a right-wing big government guy now, and that makes sense for him given the demographics of the coalition that he's going for. And that's who Donald Trump is. Remember, Donald Trump yelled at the GOP caucus saying don't F around with Medicare.
But the problem with Donald Trump is that he encompasses all these complexities, right? On the one hand, he's a populist who is talking about big government. On the other hand, he is a sort of, let's cut taxes and help wealthy people and everyone else. So it's a complicated picture.
The administration was trying to raise the top tax rate here. The J.D. Vance, Josh Hawley part was looking to propose an increase in the top tax rate. That is the biggest difference between Trump 1.0 and Trump 2.0. The first administration was conservative in policy. This one is decidedly populist.
Right. I mean, the problem with today's politics for the Republican Party and to some extent the Democratic Party, 10 years ago, your earlier frame would have been the dominant one. When our politics was defined by left versus right, what is the appropriate size and scope of government? But that's not where we're at now, right? Our politics today is more front versus back. People who feel like they're stuck at the back of the line versus everyone in front of them.
It's class.
It's class. It's populist on both the left and the right. And so it is a very difficult place, I would think, heading into midterms, for Republicans to be out there owning cuts to these programs that are going to hurt the people who feel like they are stuck at the back of the line, especially since most of them are coming in their states. Joni Ernst might be fine. You're probably right. But this is now becoming, I think, a problem for the party writ large. And don't get me wrong, we're struggling with it too in the Democratic Party. But I think that's why people like Josh Hawley are making so much noise, because they get it. The whole size of government.
I agree with your whole premise, but I think their solution is wrong. They think that, as Jonah said, that the Trump coalition was born on economic issues. I think it was on cultural issues. They look at it and say, hey, he won all these blue-collar voters, so we need to adopt the labor union economics of the Democrat Party. And I just think that's mistaken.
Right. So speaking of populists and how the parties began this shift, you may remember back to when Republicans, with help from Democrats, bailed out the big banks, started the Tea Party, which is in part some of this. The overlying sort of economic trend lines that we are looking at, it's driven in part by tariffs, but there are other things at hand, have people like Jamie Dimon, who of course runs one of those big banks, and is someone who President Trump seems to listen to. He did an interview on Fox Business, and he had a pretty intense warning for the country. Let's play it, and we want to talk about it on the other side.
How much are you focused on debt and deficits right now?
It's a big deal. It is a real problem, but one day we're going to have the bond market's going to have a tough time. I don't know if it's 6 months or 6 years. If people decide that the U.S. dollar isn't the place to be, yeah, you could see, spreads gap out, credit spreads gap out, and that will become a problem. We had that during COVID. The Fed promptly stepped in then. We had that in 2019. We had it in 20. It will happen again. It's just, I can almost guarantee you that. I just don't know exactly when or what the trigger might be.
So Jonah Goldberg, he's saying there might be a crack in the bond market, which obviously Americans revolted when they felt like big banks were getting treated a certain way. He's making an argument that we need to have less regulation so banks can do more to prevent this. I think we should underscore that if there's actually a crack in the bond market, the implications for everyday Americans are enormous and, quite frankly, scary.
Yeah, no, they potentially catastrophic. And this is why James Carville famously once said that he used to want to be reincarnated or born again as a 500 hitter or a pope or a president, but then he decided he wanted to come back as the bond market because they're the ones who are really powerful. And I think there's a lot of truth to that, is that the bond market gets a vote on this stuff. And if you see interest, already interest on the debt is becoming one of the largest items in the federal budget, and it would get much, much worse very, very quickly. If we lost the status of the dollar as a reserve currency, it could be a catastrophe. And the reason why the bond markets got so skittish last week is that there's just no sounds from the Republicans who control Congress that they take debt seriously anymore.
Neither party's being honest with the American people. We're $36 trillion in debt. We used to sound the alarm bells at $6, $7, $8 trillion. We're now at $36 trillion in debt, and neither party has come up with a solution to address entitlements. As Jonah said, for the first time in American history, if you add up Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and interest on the debt, it's more than the revenue we bring in before we even touch domestic spending.